For the most part, we all grew up reading fairy tales, from Cinderella to Snow White, Rapunzel, and even Hansel and Gretel. However, as we know, most of these stories had dark beginnings, and there are many more out there in the world that we have yet to feast our eyes upon. So today on Top 5 Scary Videos, I'm going to be counting down our list of the top 5 fairy tales that would make great horror movies, part 2. Before we begin though, be sure to stick around until the end of the video where I'll be responding to some of your comments. And if you want to check out similar videos to this, be sure to click on our Scary Literature playlist right after this video. With that, let's jump in. Coming in at number 5, The Goose Girl. Coming from my favourite, The Brothers Grimm, this story tells of a queen who sent her daughter away to be married. Being a good mother, she made a charm out of her own blood in order to protect her daughter, then sent her away accompanied by a maid and a talking horse named Falada. After a while, the princess became thirsty and asked her maid to fetch her a drink from a nearby river. However, to her surprise, the maid refused, stating, "If you want a drink, get it yourself. I won't be your servant." When the princess leaned out over the river to drink, the charm her mother gave her fell off and was swept away by the current. The maid, seeing that the princess was now unprotected, forced her to swap clothes and horses and to swear an unbreakable oath that she would never reveal her true identity, and if she were to refuse, the maid would kill her and leave the body in the woods. Now when they arrived at a kingdom nearby, the maid introduced herself as the princess and in turn wed the king's son, while the real princess was forced to attend to their needs. The real maid was desperate to cover her tracks, so she had her horse Falada killed, and following this, the real princess bribed a butcher to hang his head over the city gate so that she could still see and talk to him every day because she was so distraught. Now, on one particular day, a young boy attempted to pluck one of the princess's hairs, and in retaliation she summoned a wind to blow his hat away. This annoyed the boy and he ran to the king, telling him about the strange girl with powers who talks to horses. The king begged the girl to tell him her problems, but she refused, so instead he told her to tell her problems to the stove, as it might make her feel better, and secretly while she did this he waited outside and overheard the entire thing. He then married his son to the real princess and had the real maid killed. The end. In at number 4, Hans the Hedgehog. One of many Grimm's tales on our list, this fairy tale tells of a young man who was ridiculed by the village because his wife was unable to bear children, which is absolutely awful and cruel in my opinion. But anyway, this isn't about me. Out of desperation, the man prayed to God, begging for a child, any child, even a baby hedgehog. His wish was ultimately granted, with his wife quite literally giving birth to a half-hedgehog child that they named Hans. The couple were horrified by their child, who has a top half of a hedgehog and a bottom half human. The parents decided to put it behind the stove and leave it there for 8 years, which is awful. Hans, however, did not die, but instead asked his father for a rooster so he could ride it off and live in the woods. His father allowed this, and Hans lived in the woods where he tended to sheep and played bagpipes in the trees. However, one day a king became lost in the woods and asked Hans to show him the way home. Hans agreed, but only if the king promised to award Hans, in writing, the first thing that greeted him when he returned home. But the king knew Hans was illiterate and tricked the hedgehog by writing down an order for his guards to attack any hedgehog riding a rooster who appeared in the kingdom. Lol. However, a second king found himself in a similar situation not long after, but did not trick Hans, but instead promised him the first thing he saw when he returned to the kingdom, which happened to be his daughter. Hans then travelled to the kingdom, slipping by the guards who tried to kill him, and impaled the deceitful king's daughter with his quills. After that, he returned to the second kingdom and married the princess. However, on their wedding night, he tore off his hedgehog skin and ordered the guards to burn it in a fire, in turn becoming a human boy. Coming in at number 3, Mother Hole. Now this is a truly creepy fairy tale that tells of a widow and her 2 daughters. One is her biological daughter, who was said to be ugly and lazy. The story's words, not mine. The other was her stepdaughter, who was beautiful and kind. Due to this, the widow despised the stepdaughter. Yes, I know this sounds very Cinderella-esque, but it's different. Just hear me out. The widow would force her stepdaughter to sit by a well, spinning cloth until her fingers would bleed. On one particular day, the stepdaughter accidentally dropped the spindle in the well, so out of fear and pure panic, she jumped into the well after it. However, instead of landing at the bottom, she awoke in a meadow full of sunshine. She walked around the new land, admiring the greenery and beauty of it all. She even came across a baker's oven full of bread and an apple tree filled with fresh fruit. She eventually arrived at the house of Mother Hole, an old ugly woman who asked her to clean her cottage. The girl did as she was told and was rewarded by Mother Hole by being covered from head to toe in gold, given her spindle back and returned to the world. The widow was of course impressed by her stepdaughter's newfound wealth, so she decided to send her biological daughter down the well to retrieve gold. However, the daughter refused to take take the bread out of the oven or get apples from the tree, and her work for Mother Hole was lazy. She was asked to leave. So instead of returning with gold, she was coated from head to toe in burning pitch, which stuck to her for the rest of her life. In at number 2, the Flayed Old Woman. This old Italian fairy tale is quite literally called the Flayed Old Woman, which is quite the name. It tells the story of two old ugly sisters who lived together not far from a king's castle. On one particular day, the king went out for a walk and heard one of the women singing. He was so impressed by her voice that he assumed she must have been young and fair, and in turn he fell for her instantly. The woman realized that this may be her chance for glory, so she attempted to fool the king into thinking she was young and beautiful by sucking on her wrinkled fingers and only showing him her hands. Then she proceeded to pull back her wrinkly skin and approach him in the darkness. The king discovered the ruse and threw one of the women from a tower. However, she got caught in the tree branches below and didn't die. Instead, she hung there by her saggy skin, weeping. Not long after, a few forest fairies began to hear her cries, and they gifted the woman with clothes, servants, and anything else she could ask for. And to top it all off, they made her young. I think we all know where this is going. The king then sees her and how beautiful she has become, so he marries her. You would assume all is well in the world now, however that is not the case. The other woman became extremely jealous of her sister's youth and beauty, so she demanded that her sister tell her how she was transformed. The now youthful sister became so fed up with her questions that she told her she'd become young by flaying herself, and the sister believed her, resulting in her going to a barber to be flayed, and then she died. The end. And finally, coming in at number 1, we have the 3 Snake Leaves. This is another dark fairy tale that comes to us from the Brothers Grimm. This story tells of a powerful king who had a daughter who was said to be very beautiful but also very strange. The daughter had many suitors, yet she refused to marry anyone who would not agree to be buried alive with her if she were to die first. I quote, "If he loves me with all of his heart, of what use will life be to him afterwards?" Straight savagery. During this time, a peasant boy left home to earn money as a soldier. However, during battle, most of his comrades were killed, but he was left alive and led them to victory. For his bravery, the king rewarded him by making him a knight. During his visit to the castle, the boy fell in love with the princess and agreed to her conditions of marriage, accepting to be buried with her. The two wed and lived happily for many years. That was until the princess became ill and died. And of course, the husband began to think of ways to get out of his promise to her. However, the king's guard would not allow it and locked him in the princess's tomb to die. While in the tomb, he saw a snake in the cracks of the walls, so he killed it to protect his wife's corpse. However, not long after, a second snake appeared in the tomb with 3 leaves which are placed on the first snake's wounds, bringing it back to life. Both snakes then disappeared, but the leaves remained, and the boy used them to bring the princess back to life. The two then escaped from the tomb and boarded a ship back to the castle. However, the leaves weren't what the boy expected, and they changed the princess, making her cruel. She ended up falling in love with another, the ship's captain. The pair plotted to throw the boy overboard so that they could instead wed. However, a servant saw the act take place and saved the boy from the harsh waters. When the princess and captain returned to the castle, the king was angered by her crimes and sentenced her and the captain to death by sending them out to the sea in a ship filled with holes. Well, there we have it. Do you guys agree with that list? With any scary fairy tales that we missed? Leave us your thoughts and feelings in the comments down below, and perhaps we can do a part 3. Before I go though, I just want to respond to a few comments from part 1 of this list. Jesus Saves for Half said, "Honestly, just about every fairy tale in its original form would make a great horror movie." That is very true. Almost every single fairy tale is dark. Its original roots are Keith Dyer said, "Any story from the Brothers Grimm would make a good horror movie." That's true. A lot of our favourite fairy tales are Brothers Grimm stories, but did you know they were written for adults? They weren't for kids originally. That's why they're so dark. N.A. Parry said, "I especially like the sausage story. There should be more horror stories with sausages in them." Great list. I've never actually had that thought that there should be horror movies with sausages, but you pose a good point. Rick C said, "Your job could be done better by a sausage. It's the insult I need to keep close at hand in the future." It's very true. It's the insult of a century. You need to hold on to that one. I want to whip that out when someone least expects it. Your job could be done better by a sausage. Red Comrade of Steel 1974 said, "Lucy McPhee, you'll be a great character as a pale queen who died and returned to haunt a castle during dark ages." It's very true. I feel like I was born for that role. Usagi Shane said, "I just would like to be mentioned in response to the comments." Well, you were mentioned in response to the comments. There you go. And on that note, if you haven't already, be sure to give this video a big thumbs up, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss another scary vid. And until next time, see you later. The daughter had many suitors, yet she refused to marry any who would not agree to be buried. The daughter had many suitors. If he loves me with all of his heart, of what use will life be to him? Straight savagery. During his visit to the castle, the boy fell in love with the princess and agreed to. No. because it's a long video. Too much.